recessions, we saw cyclones and turbulences and pandemics. But one thing has not changed, I must say, is the spirit and commitment of Ravi and team to SSF, the cause of SSF, and the commendable job they have done so far, and wish them the best moving forward. Congratulations. So, turbulence and generating escape velocity, that's what we've been focusing on in this today event. And yesterday we learned about how to visualize and how to strategize in these turbulent times to get that rocket velocity and aim for that North Star of anti-fragile, as Ravi said. So to take us through beyond strategy, when visualization and strategy is the important part of execution. How do we execute in these times of DAU, TAU? Yesterday, the host was giving me another one acronym called CAU, which is chaos as usual. So in these times, how do you execute and try to become anti-fragile is really the focus of this session. Personally, in my experience, having spent a few decades in the enterprise world, I think three aspects really stand out for any successful execution. Number one is the decision-making effectiveness. Based on the strategy, how do you drive decision-making at all levels in the organization is the number one aspect that makes or breaks an execution successful to start with. Number two is the whole execution loop, which is execution is not all about sweat and effort. Execution is about taking the decisions and then from there to the actions and then finally getting the outcomes. So how do you close that loop and get to the outcome that you want to out of the execution? That's the number two aspect. And the third is the favorite topic of all over India is maximum governance. I mean, how do you achieve governance sustained to track this whole journey of execution? So these three really combine to provide the successful execution goal at the end. And decision making, as I said, has been a big challenge. It continues to be. The best of enterprises with the best of resources, processes, really may not achieve the goal because the decision-making process is not most effective. In my career, I've tried to make teams to be self-reliant, to be able to take decisions at all levels, make the troops in the front to be build a culture of fail once, fail fast. Not to be hesitant to take decisions, to be owning the decisions. And I think that is very much required in enterprises, even during turbulent times or otherwise. I think a great example that we all experienced in this decision-making effectiveness is we all know cricket, especially in India. So this is the Australia series. End of first test, turbulence hit the Indian cricket team, Indian cricket world, India itself. We lost the first test. We did not have many things going into the second test. Really turbulence. And then how do you generate escape velocity to come out of that turbulence and achieve the North Star goal of success? I think the defining decision in the series happened in the beginning of the first test in the first hour. And that is Ashwin coming to bowl at the end of 10 overs. So some of you who are very closely follow test cricket will understand what I'm saying. But arguably, that is the most effective decision taken in the series, and the rest is history. If that decision was not taken at that time, and the trajectory could have been very different. So the strategy to take the decision was late, but actually taking the decision, and of course, the next part is execution. So that is really the number one point is making execution. It's all about hard job of executing the strategies. Today, we have an eminent panel of practitioners who have done this execution day in, day out, and with remarkable success. As they say in construction sites, it's a hard hat's job. This whole execution, and whoever doesn't have a hard hat should not enter this place. Yep. With that, I will introduce the panelists. We have Sumit coming from Haldia. We have Dr. Sanjeev coming from Deloitte, but more we would like to hear from him on his pre-Deloitte Syngenta, experience of execution. And then we have Naveen coming from Novartis, and Anshu joining us from Ericsson. Each of them bring in a different, varied perspective. We'd like to focus on those aspects. Sumit, for example, on factory operations and how disruption and digital disruption and execution have happened. To Dr. Sanjeev on front office, disruptions and executions. Naveen talking globally how executions have been done, and Anshu finally on the, and importantly on the people aspect. With that, I would like to pass on to Naveen to start off, giving the global angle of how strategies laid out have been executed for about 3 minutes or so, Naveen. Then we will come back with some of the other aspects, including governance subsequently. Thank you. Over to you, Naveen.
Thank you, Srinivas. So, hello all. It's really nice to be here. This is a fabulous forum, and I look forward to interacting and learning from everybody here. So, Novartis is perhaps like any other corporation where we find it pretty hard to adapt our ways of working to some of the innovation and disruptive innovation that we see in the marketplace. As all large companies, we are set up as super tankers, right? We are having solid processes. We have very disciplined governance, visioning, set process, and we have programs that run into multiple years. But what we all know is that life changes at a much more dramatic pace. Right? There's more disruption coming at us from all angles. We witnessed this during COVID, but even otherwise, the entire industries that have been disrupted because of different ways of doing things, because of confluence of digital with technology and business, right? With adaption of smartphones, etc., etc. So there's just so many factors that have driven a very rapid change. So as part of our strategy then to be still part a super tank, but also behave like a speedboat, i.e. be agile, be fast, and go to different places. Novartis set up what is called as an X organization, and it's an edge organization that has been set up for the sole purpose of bringing in disruptive innovation into the company. And we realize that disruptive innovation is a much broader play. It's just not one company trying to invest in creating long impacting innovation. It's the ecosystem. So as part of the X team, we set up not only people from Novartis, but we brought in colleagues from the broader ecosystem. So almost all the Novartis's top vendor partners, i.e. some of the leading companies in the world, have all contributed a senior leader to this team for us to really comprise of a team of what we call disruptors, whose job is to really think about how can we disrupt ourselves, how can we actually work like a startup and create solutions to problems that are still not solved today, despite all the effort and despite all the investment that is going on today, right? So we also, as part of the strategy, have a very deliberately different way of working than a typical large company. So this team has a lot of freedom to devise on how we want your rewards and remunerations, on how you want the structure, on how you want people to work and report. And the entire principle is that it's one team, one result. And we work as a startup. So our job is to really be fast and fail fast and fail cheap, so that we learn from the failure. It's not frowned upon to fail, which itself is a huge cultural shift to a typical company that is very much, based on performance based incentives, right? So we moved away from what is a more or less a traditional setup to a really exciting and innovative and agile setup. And the culture that we built was really centered around some of these principles, right? And then the methodology as well. And we know that innovation is hard work. Innovation is something that is a marriage of creativity, but also takes a lot of discipline and systematic effort to actually get there. So I know Srini said we'll touch on the methodology later on, and I'll be happy to share that later on. But as a result of this, we tackled about 30 huge problem statements for the organization. We ended up experimenting about 10, and we delivered maybe 3, right? But those 3 are really significantly impacting upwards of $100 million or so net present value impact to the enterprise. So that's what we've been able to achieve in about 18 months of existence as a disruptive innovation organization in Novartis. Thank you, Srini.
Yes, interesting. Naveen, I think the execution, finally the outcome. I mean, it's great to see innovation teams talking about tangible outcome, 100 million outcome. So this is really moving from a R&D flavor to a business impacting flavor. I think that's probably the future, how these things go, and on a global scale. So very commendable, Naveen. And all of this coming from Hyderabad as a center, I presume.
The team is a global team. A large number of, certainly I'm based in Hyderabad, and a large number of members of the team are based in Hyderabad. But location is not really, especially with pandemic. I mean, all our calculations of location and working together in a room have gone out of the window. So we've learned and discovered, even in highly innovative, creative, workshop-based kind of work, it is not much of a hindrance to do it virtually, and we've been pretty effective virtually.
Yep. Well, moving on, Dr. Sanjeev, from your perspective, as I said, starting with Syngenta and then on your Deloitte virtual capability center, I remember you mentioning. But before that, the Syngenta, in terms of how in an agri-business, digital disruption could be achieved and, got achieved and, outcomes were generated. Good to hear your perspective, Dr. Sanjeev.
Yeah, thank you, Srini, and good evening to all the participants and my fellow panelists. Happy to be here today. I think a couple of things I will mention. When an organization takes place and in a dynamic world where M&A and a lot of technology is coming up, and you are dealing with something which is at a large scale, and Syngenta being an agriculture company, they were operating in more than 90 countries. And farming is something where whatever you do is little less. And when you take an aim of doing it digital and making the organization or the enterprise level digital, you not only need to look at your customers, but your vendors and also your employees. So they are all the 3 territories you need to look at. The organization decided that we need to build a center, which we started a journey in 2015 and 2016 when I joined in January. That came up, and the whole idea was to help make the organization digital. And the challenge was Syngenta had been through various mergers, acquisitions, Seabag IG, Novartis, part of Novartis, part of a lot of other companies. So they had multiple systems, and the challenge was that how do we reach out to the markets, how do we reach out to the growers, and the geographies are quite different. So if you look at US market, US and Canada, there are 5,000 growers as against more than 190 million growers in India. So the scale is very different. And the average holding in India is 1.37 hectares as compared to 9 acres in US and Canada. So you are talking different technologies and how do you mechanize and automate. So the center started with a theme of shape, sustain, and simplify, and that was the idea. And 3 major themes we took up. One was connect and engage with the growers to see how we can onboard and engage and make them digital, especially in APAC geographies where there were 290 million growers across APAC. Improve channel visibility, look at field force effectiveness, and also look at our backend, which is the backbone of the organization, there we stand. So we had multiple SAP versions, at least 4 of them. So we had to bring them together, and there was a huge amount of manual effort to bring data truth or one source of truth. Similarly, for HR, we had 2 multiple systems. So the challenge was, if your backend systems are not supporting you, how do you take the front-end technology and take it to the growers? So there was a 3-pronged approach which was taken. One was to look at what our growers need and how do we engage and do this, and how do we simplify our backend. So what they started was, let's look at our backend so that whatever we bring in technologies on the top of front-ending can sustain and simplify our engagement with our growers. So what we did was, we had 300 odd physical servers, moved them to cloud, and some of them were not even supported. So that was a huge journey run out of the center to bring everything to cloud so that it becomes easy. The bandwidth is not an issue, and you can bring any technology intervention. And we went through multiple vendors, HP, Azure, Microsoft, and different. Then what we did was, we started working on backend on HR systems. So we brought in Workday as a tool to integrate all the HR systems. From a finance perspective, we went into a central finance, a version of SAP for HANA, not implementation, because having 4 instances of SAP, the data collection, the data information, the reporting was always a challenge, and closing of books. While the company got acquired by ChemChina in 2016, 2017, the Workday reporting changed to Workday 3, Workday 4, and to collect the data across 90 countries, publish that results on a quarterly basis was a challenge. And that was one of the major initiatives to digitize some of this. And on the front end with the growers, we started working on many applications. So we had India grown app called Anantam, which had around a million growers launching on that app, where you could connect, you can see our products, you can see different kind of advices, your diseases, your pest pressures, and everything else. The other was, the world was moving into digital, using drones to take pictures of what is the pesticides, what is the level of infection, what is the level of weather. Then we had soil sensors, because the humidity affects what is the level of water we need. So the world was moving into that. So bringing in drones, supporting those drone technology, that was another aim. So we brought in some of the sensors and building that technology, building that digital lab in Pune to support some of these kind of initiatives. And the third thing was, how do we make the sales force very effective and engaging, and look at the data, what's happening in the market. So implementation of Salesforce across 90 countries. And that was a key component for us. We started implementing, there were a lot of counterfeits available in the market. So track this and to control that, and getting the right product to the farmer, the inventory, where it is needed. So monsoon is unpredictable, and where you need, and when there's excess rain, there's different kind of pest pressures. To manage that kind of inventory, there are different tools which were developed. So from a technology perspective, it was a great digitization effort, which helped the organization move into truly digital. We not say that we were there, but I think that journey started and very well taken ahead. From a Deloitte perspective, a very unique experience. I joined them in September as the head of the Capability Enhancement Center. We are currently close to 900 people here. It was a virtual organization which started because we were in COVID times. So the facility was not up and running. And of course, facility is just one aspect of it. Now you are a virtual organization. And what we did was, we started connecting with people virtually, digitally, and we started tracking that work while people were mapped to CEC from the retained organization. We were able to bring in efficiency and effectiveness through multiple products which we had in terms of tracking, building products which we could effectively track, how we can reduce the turnaround time, the effectiveness, the productivity, look at some of the opportunities for chatbots, bots, and other tools. So I would say the journey has started pretty well. We are on the journey of identifying more opportunities across the organization and creating firm-wide capability in terms of delivering that service from the center, whether virtually or physically. So that's the journey, Srini, we are on right now.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjeev. Very interesting. And on that note, over to Anshu. Yesterday we heard in Ericsson that there are huge, employee strength operating, Anshu. for
Yep.
Ericsson all around. And so in this digital disruption and otherwise, the people angle, how do the disruption positively and negatively impact there, and what's been your experience to keep the disruption at bay and progress forward?
Yep. Thanks, Srini, and thanks for having me on this forum. It's really great to be here. I guess our story is very simple, and whenever we try to do complex things, we couldn't do it better. So we tried doing simpler things, and by the time we do a simple thing, it becomes complex. That's a separate story. But the whole focus was how to do it simple so that we can relate it to, and our clients or our stakeholders, which are our internal employees, they can relate it to. And this pandemic was a good tipping point because though it did not push us into a different direction, but it helped us to testify all what we have been doing in the last couple of years and to see whether it was able to stand the turbulence. When we talk about people and when we talk about, I mean, we call our HR practices people practice. The whole intent over the last year, or more so in the last in the H2 of last year, was that how do we coach ourselves? How do we do a cultural change among ourselves that we don't see an activity as a transaction or a process? How do we see it as an output? So the mindset shift was moving from a transaction based approach to an output based approach, so that the end user or the employee can see the actual product rather than an activity. The intent was that how do we reduce the handoffs between different teams and between different processes, so it's a seamless output towards the end user? How do we enable more of self-service? How do we enable more of data-driven approach in our delivery? And most importantly, we do lot talk about analytics and other good stuff, but our journey was that how we are keeping it simplistic in terms of how do we help with our what reporting, which is called the operational reporting. How do we take it to the next level of I would say how reporting, which is a descriptive analysis, and then how do we mature it towards the when reporting, which is the predictive analysis. So the journey was that how do we enable our employees to know what is happening, to know how it is happening, and most importantly, enable them and equip them to see when it would happen, or what would be new which is be coming up, or what are we doing, what would be the impact of this in coming days, quarters, and months. So that has been more a journey on the people side from a process perspective. But as I said, people and process, they cannot be looked on separately. We had a lot of push from the technology side. And for an organization of our size and scale, we have a large and complex uh, tools and process framework. What we started doing in the last couple of years, and more so in the last 1 year, is that how do we stabilize our tool framework? How do we ensure that our tools and processes are not standalone, and how the output of one tool or one process feeds into another, so that the output as well as the visualization is more end to end. And while doing this, it requires a lot of cultural change, as I said, but it requires a lot of challenger mindset for us, because we had to embrace this new working as a team. We had to do a lot of learning, and we had to do a lot of unlearning. And with a lot of technologies at hand right now, a lot of our teams, which were more or less the execution teams, they actually went on becoming the domain teams or the SME teams, not only in the area of work, but only also in the area of technology. And I would say things which really came out good was, though we were behind the scenes and we started living the life of the end user, we started seeing that the products and the services which we are offering to our employees, how do they perceive it? Do they perceive it as an activity? Do they see it as a transaction, or do they see it as a value add? So the mindset shift was towards more of customer experience or employee experience, and to see things from their perspective. And we also took a lot of steps back to see what are we doing. Are they conflicting priorities or are they competing priorities? Because what happened was that due to pandemic, we were forced to do a lot of changes in the process. And when we started doing those changes, we never knew whether this pandemic will be there for 1 month, 1 quarter, 1 year. Now we have some visibility. So the biggest change was we tried not to do changes for a short term. We assumed that this pandemic is going to stay. And we made changes right in the March of last year to see that how these changes can be sustainable for next couple of years. So that when we are out of this, we don't have to redo the things. So that was the journey, Srini, I would say, from a people perspective. And I can share some examples. We see a lot of improvement in our CSATs. We see a lot of improvement in our reduction in our processing time. We see a lot of predictive and descriptive analysis being rolled out. And in a lot of areas, we see a lot of engagement through co-creation, because earlier things were done in a war zone kind of environment where we were thinking about what to do next. But now we started partnering with business and employees, and it actually gave a different perspective. So I would say, all in all, this is the best which could have come out of this pandemic. Our processes and policies definitely were tested, and I'm happy to say that it went really good.
Excellent, excellent. I think, I mean, coming from the services world, I've spent 30 years, Anshu. This whole journey from insights to actions to outcome is no better demonstrated, explained than the work from home implemented by the entire industry. Believe me, for 30 years we've been talking about it, and then a matter of few weeks, if not a couple of months, and the whole transition happened. And glad to hear that you are tracking the outcome in terms of CSAT, ESATs. And there's a kind of a long-term perspective on some of these initiatives, which is very much required. We will come back on your how and when and what of data and management. I'm sure interesting, as well as your conflicting and competing priorities. So,
Sure.
Yep. Thanks for that. Sumit, the most quite part of the enterprise, which is the factory operations, and so it'll be good to know from you what has been the digital disruption, specifically in that area for Haldia Petrochemicals, and any other area that has been a good execution where demonstrable outcomes have been achieved. Sumit, over to you. And before Sumit starts, you're on mute, Sumit. There are Q&A happening, a lot of questions coming through. Panel members, feel free, pick up any question you feel relevant to you and go ahead and respond. We will hopefully have time to pick up a few of them. I'm tracking that. But in the meanwhile, go ahead and answer them. Yes, Sumit, over to you.
Yeah. Yes, good afternoon, Srini, and good afternoon to all participants. Nice to be here in this forum. So, Haldia Petrochemicals, if you're aware of, we are a naphtha-based cracking plant, and we also have downstream plants to produce SDP, PP, LDP, and this is basically more on the plastic and the chemical side. So both are basically were a lifeline during this COVID time. So we had a lot of pressures to keep our plant and operations running 24/7, since we are a continuous process plant. So in terms of the disruptions, yes, there were disruptions in terms of the way we were, doing the business, and the scenarios got disrupted. Some sort of a new normal was coming up into our business. The scenarios were also taking up in a different shape, So, and 2019, we started our, digital transformation journey, So we had a very clear focus and a vision, in terms of as a business partner within the organization. We wanted to be an agile and innovative and try to shift the business decisions from reactive to more of a proactive to predictive, and ideally to an automated prescriptive mode, So during this course also, as a company, we were also acquiring some new global companies like Lamar's Technology and all. So those were some of those added pressures which came in during this disruptions only. So basically, we were a part of the disruptions also by doing merger and acquisitions and looking for opportunities during that period. And since we were in that journey of digital transformation, where focus was cloud first, mobile first as our core principles, so we were shifting some of our systems and the core processes of the cloud based infrastructure, and the processes were also remapped. Like for example, for purchase, to make people more agile and aware and have a more right experience in terms of the whole sourcing. We went in for SAP Ariba. Then we are also implementing the commerce automation so that the digital connect with our vendors are made in terms of GRN, in terms of the Myron and all the processes, which is run, can it be digitally made so that internal and external stakeholders can seamlessly connect with each other, including the onboarding of vendors also was digitized so that the vendor onboarding earlier vendor is to send mails or come to our office, follow up. So all these things are now going to be in the past. So these are some of the areas which were impacting our processes to make it more efficient. There were some changes in the processes, some changes in the technology, cloud-based, mobile-based, that helped us a lot. Secondly, in the people internally, also in the HR processes, we are an old SAP ECC, which was running in the SCM system. So the COVID times, there were a lot of issues in submitting the bills and all those expenses. So those part also we moved into the cloud. We went into SAP SF, both for the enterprise control, so that the payments, the salaries, in terms of compilation of information, the employees are ease. They don't have to do much of following up internally also with the HR team. So those, in a way, the transformation was going on. Then this pandemic came. So we were forced to look into our plant operations also, because there were a bit of an issue in terms of the number of people combining together at that point of time. And there where, we had an online plant information management system, which was developed where the DCS data with a seamless integration with our process historian coming into an online platform where remotely people were able to see the critical parameters, do the process monitoring, and that helped a lot in terms of the collaboration within the operations and the technology team to come out with the cause and effect relationship and see that earlier it was more of a reactive in nature. Now with this, they had a more of a predictive in nature. The early events were coming in, the alarms were conditionally put in such a way that they could at least predict a particular event and do a course correction. So that helped a very much of an optimization of the operational process. Then we also what we did was we had manual logbooks. If you see in a process plant, when the operational logbooks were very much manual in nature, and that was one of the hindrance. People had to write down, people had to go to the field rounds, and that also they were doing it manually. So we implemented e-logbook, electronic logbook. So that was shift handovers were fully automated. So there was no manual interference in terms of handling of those information from one shift to another. And there were more close proactive monitoring from different SMEs who had the data handy and could also deliberate with the operational and the maintenance team to ensure those particular things are in place. So we didn't stop that. We, in fact, went ahead and saw that the quality of our material also was a key factor. So there also we implemented our laboratory information management system so that the sampling and the quality certificates are generated digitally, and we are able to serve our customers through a digital certificates which link back to our back-end ERP systems, so that if there is any quality problem comes, we can at least come back and say which batch had produced which material and what quality. So these are some of the internal transformations which we were presently doing from 2019-20 onwards, which pandemic, really forced us, or I would say, put the gear in a fast gear to understand that this is the need of the hour. Then slowly, what we did was we also, we're more of a, users were on the PC-based infrastructure. So that we moved them to the laptop with the VPNs and a remote monitoring, so they could easily walk through from anywhere where they're, staying, and connect to our key systems and seamlessly work. So these are some of the major initiatives we did during this pandemic period, which basically helped us to not only leverage the technology but also see and run and come out with some new business model to run our plant seamlessly, and which is getting a very impactful, as we go ahead and enlarge our technology base. Thank you.
Excellent. Integrated lab process, connecting to the backend system and digitally producing the certificates. Couldn't get more integrated than that. And I finally like your last comment saying, do away with all desktops, give everybody laptops. So that's what we're going to strongly recommend to all the budget owners here in this call and otherwise. Thanks for that, Sumit. The next part is methodology. All these execution successes are great, but how do you choose the projects which you chose, the methodology, and how do you govern the progress of those projects? What gets measured, gets done? And then finally, importantly, how do you calculate this ROI, whatever you got? Yeah, because the execution, the body of the execution is all this, the methodology, the progress, and the outcome achievement. So quick thoughts on some of that. Maybe Naveen, you spoke about 30 projects chosen. How did you choose them out of that 3 projects? How do you track them? And finally, how do you define those 3 as really yielded 100 million? So touch on that, please.
Yeah, the methodology is a really crucial element, Srinivas, and we did not realize how hard work innovation is actually. It requires a high level of discipline, which sometimes on the face of it might seem a little bit against the flow of creativity, but we need both. End of the day, if you're not able to apply an innovation, then it's really not effective, right? So we have a methodology that focuses on firstly spending a lot of time on the problem, right? We're trying to solve problems. So most of our projects don't look at innovations that are the buzzwords, but really have no application. So we are an applied innovation organization, right? So we start with a problem definition. So, and then there are stages where we basically rapidly prototype. We do a lot of hypothesis testing with those prototypes. And there is the phase we call experimentation, design and experimentation. And then we do a pilot in the real world environment, which is collects all the data points that we need to ultimately then scale it. And scale is done by the respective business owners in the organization, right? So we then switch to the role of a coach or a mentor, and we support the businesses in scaling the product or solution. So throughout this process, we collect a lot of data and engage with the business to make sure that they are hand in hand with us. Any objections, any questions they have is really converted into a hypothesis and tested. Will users who get a AI-based personal assistant really be able to save 1 hour a day? That will become a hypothesis, and we test it. And once we have a data point on that, which we didn't have, by the way, for that experiment, yet we're still trying. So if we do that, then yeah, of course, then it's a success. So that's an example of a hypothesis that's very concrete, that is tested during the experiment phase, and then we will scale based on that. So at any stage, if an experiment fails, then it's dropped out, and that's why we were always expecting to hit 2 out of 10 or 3 out of 10, because this is by nature, these are solutions that don't exist, and that's where these are unsolved problems for us and for several companies, and we're trying to actually solve the problems.
Yeah, that's great to know. Dr. Sanjeev, similarly, you have deployed drones, you have done bots deployment. How do you measure the progress, and importantly, how do you measure the ROI out of those? Because they're quite new things being done in initiatives.
I think, of course, this was a very different kind of an experience for us. We as an organization, we want to be an agile organization, and as Naveen said, learn fast, fail fast was the motto, because we were getting stuck with the old systems and everything else. So to give an example, which was very interesting, while we decided to insource, we insourced the almost uh, 300 to 400 people, and we realized that we are way behind in terms of processes, standardization, effectiveness, and productivity. And why don't we implement some of the bots? We identified 24 such opportunities and started implementing. Our aim was to simplify the complex process, look at more at compliance, and look at what our customers are expecting. So here the issue of investment versus ROI was not the first priority, but the second and the third priority, because ultimately it was the feedback from our vendors and from our key stakeholders, and which was coming in, that our processes are complex and it takes a while to change anything and to move anything. And obviously there was a level of dissatisfaction across the organization, and there were some issues which we were facing. So we wanted to simplify the processes, look at complexities, and look at our stakeholders rather than looking at the numbers in terms of dollars. And obviously, we were quite successful in implementing some of these bots while we were transitioning or insourcing back 400 positions. And that really helped us, one, to simplify, to improve our customer experience, and also the employee experience and employee level of satisfaction, because if you continue to do the repetitive and mundane jobs, you are not able to sustain and improve a process, and it just becomes repetitive. So from a this perspective, that was one idea. The other idea was to look at the flexibility and agility in terms of how we can quickly adopt technologies which are new in nature. So we brought in new talent right from the colleges, college graduates, college startups, and started developing something our own. And it's not that everything which was being developed in the lab was successful or could be, but we went into learn fast, fail fast kind of, and we started doing prototypes across the countries, whether it was some of the Android apps, whether it was some of the basic automation tools. And quite a few were successful. And then we started engaging with the partners to scale those prototypes which were successful. So I think it was quite a learning experience. I would not say that everything was based on the dollar decisions on what you are investing and what you are getting in. But once the prototypes were successful, then obviously we had the ability to go back to the drawing board, look at the dollars investment and what would be the ROI and what could be the returns on this. But some of the decisions were related to customer satisfaction, compliance, and other reasons. So it was a combination of both and not always the dollars.
Yep. Well, good to have that wider perspective that dollars will come, but let's get the flush out the thesis of the project and get the project going. And that's great to hear. So Anshu, back to the methodology which you spoke about in terms of how data gets looked at in 3 dimensions and then used effectively towards deriving your ultimate goal of ESAT or CSAT. So, and then the second aspect of conflict versus competitive. Just could you throw some light on the methodology there and how you manage those concepts?
Yeah. So I guess we do keep on saying data is new oil or data is new gold. But I guess it has been a highly overrated statement, because when we talk about data, the way I talk about data versus anybody else, there's a big difference in terms of.
Sorry, Anshu, just I forgot. Just to let the organizers, the host know that we will do the rapid poll survey just after Anshu finishes his response to this question, so that if we are ready, we will fire the poll survey after this. Yep. Thanks. Go ahead, Anshu.
Sure. No worries. So I guess first we have to interpret who is the audience, who is absorbing the data, And is that audience really ready to absorb the data and or the analytics? And when we talk about analytics, it's a widely used term, but at what level of analytics are we talking about? Are we talking about operational, prescriptive, or descriptive? Because what we have seen is there is a huge amount of data and there is a huge amount of analytics. But the problem is not everyone is ready to absorb the analytics. And even when the people are ready to absorb and interpret the analytics, they don't have the tools to take actions based on those analytics. So I can convert an Excel into a visualization, visualization into a data chart into a predictive chart. And then what? Nothing. Because our processes don't take us to that level where we can be exploring more or taking more risks. So when I talk about who data, what data, and how data, we are maturing our processes on all the aspects. Do we have the right data? What is the need of our audience? Are the audience equipped to understand the data? And if the answer to everything is yes, then what are the avenues to use the output of the data into meaningful actions, whether it is a hiring action, whether it is a reward action, whether it's a learning action, and so on and so forth. So that is more about more about data. When we talk about competing and conflicting opportunities, I mean, we all are in mad rush towards automating things, towards going digital. And I guess this is the right thing to do. But what we are not doing is that if we have to do digital, if we have to have more of automations, there is a lot of cleanup which is required behind the scenes for the systems to absorb. Yes, we talk about a lot of AI and ML kind of stuff which can do that cleanup. But when I talk about predictive and conflicting opportunities, are opportunities which can run in parallel, so they can feed to each other. The output of one becomes the input of the other, the input of one becomes the output of the other. And secondly, opportunities which have to run sequentially. It means we have to get done A before we move to B and then we move to C. So we have to prioritize the priorities in terms of conflicting or competing or sequential versus parallel from the opportunity perspective. And when we talk about data, it has to go through that whole life cycle of availability, usability, understandability, and definitely last not but the execution of the output based on the data.
Interesting. Insights. I mean, that's what we struggle with. The amount of data in enterprises. I'm sure data to insights, insights to meaningful actions, and actions to outcomes. So
exactly,
whoever can take the lead on that will get the best ROI. And otherwise, it gets lost in the siloed enterprises we all built. Sumit, your view on that in terms of what is the method to this whole execution? How do you prioritize and how do you measure, importantly, the progress? And taking an example, whichever you feel, just walk us through that, Sumit.
Yeah, I think
Sorry, Sumit. Before, if you start, we will probably do the poll survey and then have you take up so that we'll get time to see the poll survey. So the host, if you could have the poll survey. Can outsmarting of digital disruption create instability and erosion of compliance? Pick one option that is the best to protect the business and advance rapidly at the same time. Yep, we have a few options there. Yep, if we could all answer that. Yep, okay. We'll wait for the result. Sumit, over to you.
Yeah. So Srinivas, basically, if you see our journey as of now, we have built a foundation, in terms of integrating the various disparate sources which we had in operations and in business functions. And what we have done is right from cleaning up the sensors, the data, making it available in historian so that, the plant data in terms of the production figures, in terms of the flow meters and also those are calibrated, and the data comes seamlessly in a real-time basis, including the laboratory analysis, including the maintenance data, which needs to be also be analyzed. And based on that, we are building our own analytics framework with our group company, which we call MQ. And that is where the functionalities of AI and ML is coming into the picture. In fact, in the next steps, we are already embarking on our journey in S/4HANA, where the primary focus is to do from the transactions to theory-based, good UI, UX, and also give the user a perspective of an embedded analytics. So that the transactions, what they do with an informations around that particular transaction in an informed way. Another stress, which we are trying to do is in the plant is the, doing the optimization of the production and the early event detection for maintenance, because the machines will fail. But if it fails with your understanding well in advance, then at least you can save a lot of billions of dollars in terms of an unplanned downtime. And that's what is our next, next financial year. We are putting in our lot of focus on that, retrofitting a lot of these old machines with smart sensors, edge devices, so that data is secured, because cybersecurity is very much important. And combined to that, we are building small analytics engines where we can monitor some of our critical equipment so that we don't have an unplanned downtime, optimize our operational, the envelope, do the hydrocarbon accounting on a more real-time basis so that we can get a real-time EBITDA on an hourly basis, which today we get it in a day or maybe a combined one, mostly in a monthly way. So the focus is to make it more real-time so that people also can take some actions out of it. And once that framework is ready, then we are in a position, Srinivas, to come and measure what is the ROI. Because today we have just built the foundation box, the data is available, everybody is seeing the whole data in some sort of a dashboard, in some sort of a reports. But then unless you are not giving them the tool or the framework where they are easy to, mine the data in a way they would like to see the data and come out with outcomes, the ROI will not come out immediately. But yes, one of the ROIs which we have planned to do in the next financial year is the equipment downtime we need to reduce and improve the yield through operational efficiency, optimization and all. So that's our focus in the coming year.
Great. Real-time EBITDA, hourly basis. I mean, you are right at the cutting edge, Sumit, I must say.
Right.
Glad to hear that. Host, if you have the poll survey ready, we could have the results. There you go. So can outsmarting of digital disruption create instability and compliance? Exercise caution and balance between what is progressive and then what is BAU. So I think the answer is that somewhere balance between BAU and DAU. That's what it looks like is the response coming. And of course, use automation to mitigate some of these risks, which is rightfully the right way to go. Yep. So great. If you could have all the panelists unmute their videos and audios, we will just spend the last few minutes quickly, and maybe we will have a few quick and rapid fire questions from me to all of you, and we could take it from here. Naveen, if you could have you also unmute, Dr. Sanjeev. There you go. So we're all here. So a few quick rapid fire. Thank you for answering some of the Q&A, and if there's more Q&A, we will have that passed on to you. So Sumit, you spoke about the way forward, and factory environment is always a bit sensitive one. So if you were to choose between disruption using digital and losing jobs versus maintaining BAU and protecting jobs, which way would you recommend, and which way would Haldia's progress?
So I think digital and reducing jobs, the two different aspects. There are areas where we are digitizing because that's the need of the hour, because those are the manual process and there are operations and reliability risks. So in a typical process environment, you have to see that how much safe your workforce and that particular machines are there. So that's where today the digital plays a major role. So it's not about cutting jobs. It's basically to see that because a small incident in a process plant can wipe out a quarter of your revenue, and you're gone. So you don't save by, making people losing jobs, rather than if you put the digital upfront to improve your reliability and, operational risks and safety and all, that helps a much better way in terms of EBITDA, rather than only concentrating on reducing the manpower. I think that's the focus of Haldia is from the top management also. Their focus is very clear. We are going to have this digital initiatives to, reduce the operational cost, improve the reliability, and increase the safety at the plant level.
Very good. Anshu, work from home versus work from office. What would be the new norm now that you're opening up?
New norm would be what we call it as work of future and workplace of future, which will not be a work from home or work from office. It would be work from where it could happen, right? It would be a hybrid place. It could be somewhere between home and office. It would be using home as office, and definitely at point in time using office also as home, right? Getting your loved ones and families to your workplace. So there is a lot of things which are happening at our workplace in this regard. But
so you're increasing your confusion, because as such are wondering whether
no,
employees are working. Now you're in between option.
Yeah, definitely. And Srini, that's going to happen. We will not be going back to the office the way we were going, and we will not be staying at home the way we are staying at home for the last 1 year. I mean, the lines will get diluted, but they will be getting diluted for better, where we can get best out of the both of the environments. When I said last year was great for us, in spite of pandemic, was because the work environment and the home environment was conducive and supporting each other. But yes, it cannot be sustained for a longer time. Then we have to find the right hybrid balance. So I would say it will not be back to normal, but definitely it would be definitely a new normal for sure.
Yep. Dr. Sanjeev, man versus machine, which is the future?
I think you can't replace man with a machine. Obviously,
you seems to be doing it already. You got 25 bots. It's a matter of time before they become 2,500. No.
No. But if you look at the man, what we are doing with the man is we are upskilling people, right? And they're doing much more meaningful job, much more analytics job, and much more. So it's just removing the mundane jobs, repetitive jobs, standardized jobs up to our upskilling, and people are happy because they have time to invest in themselves, and it's bringing up the talent, and the people are excited to leverage both. So I think it is the times are going to come where we are going to leverage both. We can't replace man. Machine will do what we used to spend many hours and without doing any great outcomes. So it's a combination of both, I would say.
Yep, hopefully so. And Naveen, what's future? What's the next roadmap for projects at Novartis? And what do you see this innovation spanning out? I think there was a question to you also saying innovation, is it a specialist activity, or innovation is always Paul pervasive in the company? So is Novartis anyway going in that direction?
Yes, I think future is more and more disruptive innovation, right? And more ecosystem plays. So we have to get together as a group of companies, as innovators, and develop solutions. It's no longer I'll do my own thing, I think. So I think future is definitely ecosystem.
Great. I think we've been already reminded twice on our time. It's great listening to all of you practitioners. This is where rubber meets the road, and glad to learn a lot from the four of you today. And future for us in the place where we work, that Experience Flow is an intelligent enterprise, which is autonomous in many ways. It is self-detecting, self-improving, and self-transforming. And I think it's a combination, intersection of man machine, and that's where we see it going from here. Thank you for all your time and insights. I really enjoyed it. Hope the participants did too. And with that, we will be closing the session. Thank you all.